scathing independent review into the abuse at Dilworth School in Auckland has been released, detailing the horrendous acts that took place at the school that was supposed to be a safe haven for vulnerable boys. The 503-page report found the Dilworth School Board knew about the abuse that took place between 1950 and 2005. It also says the board failed to investigate complaints properly and didn't report the majority of complaints to the police, as well as allowing offenders to leave the school with glowing references in some cases. 11 people are in jail over the historical sexual offending that happened at the school. I'm joined this morning by Neil Harding, who is a survivor and led the Dilworth class action suit, and Steve Gray, who's not an abuse survivor but was a pupil in the late 70s and early 80s. And he remembers a stern warning from fellow pupils on his first day and the efforts to keep him quiet when he raised concerns as a 13-year-old. Good morning.
Morning.
Neil, let's start with you. I mean, this has been many, many years in the making. The inquiry has provided 19 recommendations. What do you make of them?
A very comprehensive report. It resonated. It was vindicating, the report of finally we have some truth, and it's different to what the Dilworth narrative has been over the decades. The most interesting recommendation is one around governance, and that they have the wrong governance model, that Dilworth should be a school with assets, not a property investment, now development company fronting as a school. They have the more of a commercial business model rather than a school governance model, so that we've got the wrong model and the wrong people.
They're the wealthiest school in the country, right? So do you think that, I mean, I know the board has said they're going to look at these recommendations. How much faith do you have in the school now? They say they've changed, and you know they've introduced many different things since these complaints have been raised. But what do you make of if they do put these recommendations in place? I
have no faith, and the fact that Dilworth never fronted the media yesterday, giving a pre-written statement. They've had 50 years to get ready for yesterday, and. You know, they've had that report. Well, they've had sections of the report through a natural justice process for maybe even a couple of months. But in terms of, they should have fronted. And until the chairman of the board fronts and said any questions, nothing will change.
Has this provided any closure for you and other survivors?
It marks the end of the beginning in my journey. And it's been 5.5 years to get to this point, and there's a lot of work to go. There's a lot of, in terms of redress, you know, this happened to me when I was 11 in 1977. 2023, we get the truth, and now we've got to go through a process of redress, which Dilworth are completely controlling. One of the other recommendations was that they collaborate with us, and you were there at the beginning with me at the Royal Commission.
Yes. I
offered collaboration 5.5 years ago, and it quickly became combative once I realised that there was a bit of a cover-up. And so fundamentally we've got the wrong model and the wrong people.
They said that they were, Dilworth, that is, the board was saying that they needed this inquiry to be completed before they even consider what they might do in terms of redress. And I know it's an independent group that will be doing that, but I mean, how do you feel about this? I mean, you say you were 11 at the time and it's still going on and it's going to continue for some years, is it?
Well, that's my concern, and there's a lot of guys that are hurting that need redress. I want to be able to move on with my life. This happened to me. I was only there for 2 years, and I've spent 5.5 years trying to deal with something that was only 2 years. Not minimising what happened to me, obviously, and what happened to the other boys. Something needs to happen, and it needs to happen quickly.
Absolutely.
I can add to what Neil just said. I mean, for the last 4 years, the boys have had to go to the Royal Commission, to the police and to the Dilworth inquiry. And during that time, Dilworth has been moving ahead with their plans to open a girls' school, which in the history of bad ideas, I think Dilworth opening a girls' school is right up there. And they're also moving ahead with all this real estate. The Dilworth Trust Board should be administrating the school, not becoming a real estate tycoon band. And they really have lost the whole focus of what they were set up to do. They were there to run a school for underprivileged orphan boys. And now they're moving off into being like the Donald Trumps of New Zealand. They need to refocus on the boys and on the school and stop all this other stuff. They're worth $1.2 billion. They do not need to move into starting real estate ventures. They need to focus on what they were meant to do, which was helping the pupils of the school.
Yes, and let's return to when you first started at Dilworth, because I know that you were warned on your first day about the activities happening there.
Yeah, I was told to stay away from the Reverend because exactly what happened would happen as well. And it was common knowledge around the school, and it always had been. The worst thing is, I thought when I left, they'd started sorting it out, and it just got worse. It actually multiplied and doubled and tripled what was going on with the abuse. They never, and I told the school when I was 13, and I was threatened with legal action. I was a 13-year-old child, and they've never addressed any of us. I think that's the other point, Neil made. They haven't talked to any of the survivors, any old boys. If you mentioned it on their page, you were kicked off and banned. They've never, ever offered good faith dialogue with any of the people who went through the stuff at the school. Because as the report shows so clearly, it was not just sexual abuse, it was physical abuse, it was bullying, it was mental torture. The place was a hellhole for decade after decade, and they never affect change.
Yes, and as you say, decade after decade, 1950s till 2005. Neil, within the report, they talked to 126 abuse survivors who were sexually abused, but they also found a further 49 boys within this inquiry. So are there still men out there who haven't raised their concerns? Are you still hoping people will come forward?
Well, what we need to remember is that this report is only representative. Not everyone did actually get to speak to the inquiry. And I know there are some guys that that didn't speak and may have had been concerned that they haven't spoken. But what I'll say to them is it's okay, this is enough, what we have. So this isn't all the voices. We've got 500 pages of carnage, and there's, I don't know how many more pages that could have been written that weren't. And my advice is to them is if they feel strong enough to come and stand with us.
I know of quite a few boys that haven't come forward, and we've also got to think about the number of boys that haven't lasted this long, that it was just too much for them, and their voices will never be heard about what went on at the school for them.
Well,
and this badge represents, I wear this for the guys that are no longer with us, and I hear that there's about 26 maybe that have committed suicide.
At least.
At least, yeah.
Thank you so much for your time this morning and for raising all of these issues and for banding everyone together and gathering people. And thank you so much to Neil Harding, who led the Dilworth class action suit, and former Dilworth pupil Steve Gray. It's 19 after 7. In a statement, Dilworth Chairman Aaron Snodgrass says the report is unsparingly honest about the school's historical failures to protect students. He says the report will help the school to learn from past mistakes. He says the board apologises to all those who suffered abuse while students at the school and their families. He says the report makes abundantly clear that it was not their fault, that's the students' fault, it was the school's fault that failed to protect them, and for that they are truly sorry. Neil is shaking his head here as I read that out. It's 19 after 7.